Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. We are sitting down with Gloria Vanderhorst. She has been a psychologist for over 50 years, and she's here today to show us or talk to us about her wisdom that she's gained through the years of working with adults to preschoolers. And she's also a New York bestseller. She has a book called Read, Reflect, and Respond, and it's the 3 R's of growth and change. Gloria, thank you so much for joining us today. We truly
You're
appreciate it.
welcome. I'm looking forward to a really good conversation. Very
We love
interesting
that.
ideas.
Love it. Yes. So go ahead and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, let's see. As you said, I've been a psychologist for a very long time, and I got into psychology in a very unusual way. I wanted to be a math teacher. I wanted to teach high school math because I loved math, and it was very easy for me until I ran into calculus 2. And that was the dead end for math. And so I flipped my major and my minor so I could still graduate in the 3-year plan that I had. And my minor was psychology.
Oh,
And it just was the right fit for me. And sometimes life will give you a curveball,
Yeah.
make you turn a corner, and it's just exactly the place that you're supposed to be. So I have always loved being a psychologist and working with people. And I've worked with people from preschoolers
Mhm.
all the way up through the age range. And I started working with preschool boys. And as a result of that, I ended up working with boys of all ages, as well as with adult men.
Mhm.
So I say I have been pickled in what it's like to be a male in this culture.
okay.
And it's a very, very interesting story, and one that I am hoping to change, right? To influence people to
Sure.
change the way that we relate to our boys, particularly starting in infancy and preschool, because we do some pretty serious things to them emotionally as infants and preschoolers.
And
So why did you choose specifically to work with preschool boys over just in general, maybe both girls and boys together?
It's a great question. I had a friend who ran a preschool.
Mhm.
And as you might expect, most preschools are run by women and they're staffed by women.
Yes.
And so the women identify the boy who is more wiggly, right?
Yep.
And doesn't really want to sit in the circle and fold his hands and listen to the story. He's going to elbow the kid next to him or
Yeah.
fiddle with something, and
Yeah.
chew
yeah,
on
yeah.
his
Yep.
chew on
Yep.
his collar, do something to keep motion and to keep engaged. And so he stands out. The little boy stands out, and the teacher goes, I don't know what to do with him. Maybe there's something wrong with him. Why don't we refer him for an evaluation? And so that's how I got to work with preschool boys, is that the preschools in the area where I was just recognized that I was doing evaluations of preschoolers, and the majority of them were boys that were referred. I say if I were in charge of preschools, first of all, I would put a male teacher and a female teacher in every preschool, and I would put a tree in every preschool so the boys can climb the tree and listen to the story and not have to sit in the circle and fold their hands in their lap.
Oh my god, I love this. I love this. I have 2 boys of my own. This is
Wonderful.
So I've got two of each,
Nick's
so
got 2 also.
I see both sides of it.
Right. Well, we do some pretty serious emotional training of
Mhm.
our boys, and I would love to have an intervention that would derail the way in which we socialize our boys, because we tell our boys as soon as they can walk that they are not supposed to cry. Now, think about it, right? They're on their feet, moving around, they're going to fall down. They're gonna bump their heads. They're gonna get irritated, right,
Yeah.
when somebody takes their favorite toy, and they're naturally going to cry.
Yeah.
And when they do, we tell them to stop crying.
Mhm.
I tell people, go to the local park or go to the mall. Watch the difference between the way that parents relate to little girls and the way that they relate to little boys. On the playground, if a little girl is in line for the slide and gets shoved out of line, right, and knocked about a bit, she's going to start crying and run to her parent. Her parent is going to pick her up and ask her what happened.
Yeah.
All right. She's going to tell the story of what happened and they're going to give her comfort. They're going to put her back on her feet and send her back in line. Little boy, same scenario. He gets bumped out of line. He's crying. He goes to his parents. He does not get picked up. They look down at him and they ask, what happened? If he gives a good enough story, a good enough explanation, he will get some comfort,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but he will be turned around and put back in line without being picked up and comforted and held. We don't do this to our little boys. We do it to our girls. Why? Right? Why in the world would we offer comfort to our little girls and not offer comfort to our little boys?
Right.
That's happened for centuries, absolute centuries. We have this ingrained perspective that boys should be tough and they should be strong and they should not be sharing emotions. And then when they grow up and they have children and they get married, we expect them to somehow pull out of the hat emotion and tenderness and
Mhm.
sweetness
Yeah.
and lightness, right? We have for decades trained them not to do that.
Interesting.
So it's not going to happen magically.
Nope.
It has to start in infancy and preschool that we change the way that we relate to our boys.
So, question for you, and I don't know if this is something that has an actual firm answer. But so you're saying that when they're in preschool and the teacher wants them to sit and listen and, they're all over the place, what would be the best alternative for perhaps a student or a boy that is a little more rambunctious than everybody else, but still needs to listen?
That's the function of the tree. But if you can't put a tree in the school, then, we have all kinds of fidget toys, all right, that you can use with your hands.
Right.
And definitely, I would have a bunch of fidget toys to pass out to boys and girls,
Mhm.
right? Because some of the girls need those fidget toys too.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
And to tolerate the fact that if the boy needs to get up and kind of walk around, as long as he stays in the hearing area
Yeah.
for the story, he should have that freedom to move and to walk around or to use a fidget toy, to use his hands in some way. All right. Or stuck on his collar,
Yeah.
which a lot of them do.
When do
Yeah.
you think it comes to the point where perhaps like maybe the child needs to be tested or, it needs to be maybe like the next step further because it's maybe a little too much?
That does happen. All right. And so it is important to evaluate early when you do suspect that maybe this child has attention deficit, because the earlier you intervene, the more you can facilitate learning tools that they can use, all right, for calming. The fidget toy, for example, is one of those tools that they can use. So it is important that you discern, is this just a normal boy with energy that is common for a normal boy, or
Mhm.
is this a boy who really is having attention issues and needs some extra support and some extra devices in order to be successful in the classroom?
Do you think that like nowadays that there's too many kids that are being tested and maybe it should be more of a boys will be boys type of thing? I don't know because I feel like
I Yeah, I think there's research out there that we've gone kind of too far in identifying boys as having attention deficit and medicating them early on when in fact maybe they don't. have attention deficit and that there are other ways of intervention and other ways of managing the behavior of boy or girl who's fidgety and kind of needs to move around much more than the other children in the classroom. So we do over identify, and I think we over medicate. But
Oh,
in
goodness.
general, we have this attitude towards our boys that they should not be expressing emotion, right? We want them to be brave. We don't want them playing in the doll corner. All right. We really don't want them playing in the kitchen corner, even though most famous chefs are male, right? We still don't at preschool want them playing in the kitchen corner or the
Really?
household corner. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right. They get directed to the trucks and the blocks and the sand,
Really?
right?
I know lots of little boys that play in the kitchen. Like at my church, I'm in charge of like the nursery area, the 0 to 4-year-olds. Everybody's in the kitchen. Everybody's doing this, doing that. It's like, do your thing. I don't care.
Yeah, which is wonderful because
Yeah.
they should have the freedom, all right, to play and be attracted to anything. I remember when my daughter was in preschool, these dolls came out that were unisex. They were stuffed. I can't remember what they were called. Be helpful if I remember that.
It's like,
But that was the first time that a doll experience was designed for both boys and girls, because the majority of doll experience is designed for little girls to learn how to take care of babies.
Right.
Right?
to be like
That's the
mommy.
function and how to
Yeah.
be a
Yeah.
female, right? Barbie is teaching you how to be a female, but we need to educate our boys on taking care of others as well,
Yeah.
because they will grow up to have children.
Yeah.
All right. And I want them to be able to be connected to their children in a deep emotional way and know how to care for them and how to listen to them and how to be emotionally available to them, not just help them with homework,
Yeah.
right? And give them assignments to mow the lawn.
Right.
Right? I want them to be emotionally connected, not just practically connected, but we have organized ourselves so that the male is a practical connector to his family and his children and not an emotional connector. That's why men die younger. All right. We don't let them express emotion. They have to hold it all in. And if you hold it all in, it begins to take over parts of your body. Right.
My
And
boys definitely express their feelings. They definitely express it. Sometimes they want to punch each other and I have to step in. But I'm like, maybe we express it a different way. Yeah, no, I just was sitting here thinking because you mentioned so many things. You were talking about how sometimes we over medicate our children. And I even allowed to, I can say this story. Growing up, I had a friend whose parents were foster parents, and they had a young boy come in. He was found living in a closet because he was the only boy, and they didn't, he was obviously
yes,
severely
terrible.
abused. And they had him on medicine because they said he had ADHD and he had all this. And she said, this was obviously back in the early 90s. And she said, can I take him off of this medicine? Can we just try? She says, because if he was my biological child, she goes, I wouldn't want him on this. She goes, can we just please try? And obviously, back in the 90s, a little bit more
Right.
lenient they are now. And they said, okay. And she took him off of it. He didn't need to be on it.
That's
After like
great.
a month, he was like, obviously he had other issues and whatnot, but he didn't need to be on this ADHD medicine. And I mean, they ended up getting guardianship of him and he never had to leave. But even his
Great.
social workers were just like, wow. They're like, we just went with what we were told. And she's just like, I
Right.
just wanted, she said, she goes, had she really noticed that he did have ADHD, then yes, obviously she would have allowed him to be on it.
Right.
But something in her, she just goes, I just need to see
That's great.
if he needed it. And He didn't have to be. And he is an amazing young man now. He's married, he's got kids. Never thought he was going to get there because, like you said, he was never taught to
Right.
express himself because he had never been hugged or touched. He didn't know what that
Mhm.
was like. And he went into I've told Donna the story before. He went into the house with this family that was all about touching and hugging. And even with me, I was like, oh, okay, I have to get over being
Right.
touched, you know? And I
Right.
walked in the house one day and he's like, Nikki, and he runs up to me, hugging me. I'm like, wait, what? Like, I was shocked
That's
because
right.
literally that was like a completely different child. And he learns
Right.
to express himself to and have emotion. So when his biological parents called when he was 18, he had no problem bringing out all that emotion and
Mhm.
telling them how
He
he
worked
felt.
on it.
And obviously his the foster parents who he calls his mom and dad never
Right.
told him what to do, never told him what to say when it came to this. And he was able to tell them, his biological parents, how he truly felt. And he cried and he yelled and he screamed. And he's just like, you gave me life, but that's all you get from me. And he
Yeah.
hung up the phone
Right.
and that was the end. And it was just, I know another little boy who is he has a lot of emotion. He does cry because he's very sensitive and and it's perfectly fine. Like when I was one day, he got upset about something and I got down on my knees eye level and I was like, it's okay. I'm like, what? Tell me what happened. And he told me he was frustrated. And I'm like, that is perfectly fine. I'm like, we
Mhm.
can start over. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, do you not want to wear this whole costume? And he's like, no, I'm like, do you just want to wear, like, we compromise. I'm like, how about the hat? Or maybe
Right.
this.
Mhm.
And he's like, yeah, I can do that. I'm like, that's perfectly fine. Like, you must, I was eye level
Right.
with him and I was like, talk to me. Tell me what we need to do. What do you want to do? And he told me, and I was like, all right, we're good. Let's go.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
And that's what every child needs, right?
Yeah. Right.
They
Yeah.
need to be connected and
Yeah.
they need to know that you're interested in them
Yep.
and care about what their experience
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
and not just follow kind of this rigid approach
Yep.
that boys should be this way and girls should be that way.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful story. I love it.
Yeah. It was,
So
yeah.
working with like, we'll pass preschool, we'll go to like an older group of students or children. What do you find helps the most when they're older and they really need to get those feelings out and they don't know?
Yeah, Nicola just really described it, which is you need to understand your history, right? Because that history accumulates and shapes how you feel about yourself, how
Right.
you connect with others, and how you show up in the world
Yeah.
around you. So, the healthiest thing that we can do for our children is to really be transparent about their histories. All
Yeah.
right. And this young man that she's talking about was able to be angry,
Yeah.
right? And to
Mhm.
protest because he knew his history,
Mhm.
right? Nobody covered up that history for
Right.
him. But we do have a tendency to cover up histories for our children. And so they engage then in certain behaviors, but they don't know, well, where's that come from? Right? Why am I doing it that way? Why do I feel this way? It's got a history to it. Right. And our brains hold on to all kinds of pieces of our history. If you go fishing for it, you will be able to find it. All right. And things that happen to you early on in infancy and early childhood do shape behaviors that you're
Yeah.
engaging in the present. So you don't have a choice until you can go back and find that root and decide whether you want to keep it or you want to pull it up and toss it away.
Yeah, I think that goes both ways. Like the specific that you were just talking about, I think it also goes that works general with men and women because obviously, there were even girls who were younger who have
Oh,
been
yeah.
probably told to repress this or not to do this and not do that, and they've hidden
Right.
it their whole lives. And then when they've gotten older or they've become parents, they're like, wait a second, hold on, shut the door. No,
Right.
that specific thing I think actually can work general for both men and
It
women.
does. It is
Yeah.
for all human beings,
Yeah.
right? Where our
Yeah.
brain holds on to pieces, what it holds on to influences how we perceive the world around us and how we respond to the world around us. But once you can identify kind of the early experience that started you down path A, you have a choice. Do I want to keep going down path A? Do I want
Yeah.
to be kind of shy and retreat in social situations? Right? Because I got shamed or embarrassed when I was a kid. So I've decided not to take any risk. Or once I know that, do
Yeah.
I want to shift and say, hey, I'm going to take some risk
Yeah.
out in social situations and just see what happens because I've got energy that
Mhm.
I didn't allow myself to use before.
So when a child, I think what I was trying to ask you before was like, so when a child doesn't know their history and they're a little older now and they're speaking and they kind of need help, like where do you start to get them to come out of that shell if they don't know, like, where it all started, but they
That's it's true for your not only children but adults as well. Right? That there are pieces of our history that are boxed up, buried, and so we're not aware of
Mhm.
them. And so there are many therapeutic techniques that can facilitate opening those boxes and uncovering pieces of history. So, one of the things that I think is wonderful for children is the use of what's called sand tray work. It's
Mhm.
actually a sandbox that gets used in the office, but there are all kinds of characters and symbols and objects that you can use in the sandbox to develop a scenario. So I remember working with he was probably first grade, and had done a lot of acting out in school. And so with the sand tray, he selected people that represented his family and he buried them in the sand,
Yeah.
right? He didn't develop any kind of scenario
Yeah.
with them. He buried every one of them in the sand,
Interesting.
all right? Now that's dramatic. That
Mhm.
Yeah.
says, "Look, these people are not safe for me."
Right.
Right? These
Wow.
people
Okay.
are dangerous, and you would not have been able to discover that unless you had that opportunity to see his perspective on his family. And his perspective on his family is these people are dangerous,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's amazing.
I want to get rid of them because they hurt me.
Is that
So Santras is one of those, right? There are all other forms of therapy. There's a process called internal family systems that facilitates people taking a deeper dive into the things that are packed away in your memory, and
mm,
help you to follow kind of the yellow brick road, follow the breadcrumbs
yeah.
towards a piece of history that is now jumping into the present and influencing how you respond. So, if you've been terrified as a young child in some social situation, you grow up to be shy,
Yeah.
all right, and to be less comfortable around people. And you think, oh, this is just my character, this is my
Mhm.
personality, until you take a deep dive into your history and learn that some adult terrified you when you were 3, and your reticence to engage with other people is really based on that terror. Well, once I know that story, once I've experienced that terror and validated, yeah, that was just as scary as all get out. But you know what? I'm not 3
Yeah.
anymore. And I don't have to be confined by the experience that I had at 3. I
Yeah.
can now experiment with being more forthcoming with others, of, going up to somebody and introducing myself and starting a conversation, whereas previously that person never would have done
Right.
that, right? They
Yeah.
would have sat in the corner and wait for somebody to come and talk to them, and they wouldn't have said much anyway when somebody did.
Yeah. Wow. This is
Wow.
all so interesting. Wow. I'm just like, I'm
Yeah,
soaking it all
your
in.
history is very important. Your history is really critical.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And a lot of people don't know their history. They
That's true.
they
That's
just
true.
kind of have to go on with life, and this is how I am, like you say, and that's it.
So does this kind of
But
work
y
the
you
same?
can dig around for that history, all right? So, you can ask questions of extended family
Right.
members, all right? You can
Right.
ask questions of parents and siblings, all right? If someone has, taken photographs, you can go back through photographs and see dynamics in families, all
Mhm.
right? Or if they've taken home movies, you can really see the dynamics of
Yeah.
relationship
Yeah.
in early home movies. So you can find that, and your brain has housed this information. So you can also just kind of take your own deep dive into the brain and the history that's stored up there, and it will present itself to you.
That's
Very
yeah,
interesting.
that's interesting because I remember before my dad passed away, we were doing a lot of ancestry, DNA, and people already had submitted so many pictures, and I'd be like, we'd find these pictures and we would show it to him, and he'd be like, "Wait a minute, that's so and so." I'm like, "But it says it's this here, this person here, and it was here," and he'd be like, "Yeah." He'd be like, "Oh, I remember." And then it was then we get the whole story, and I was like, "All right." But, and it was just like we were very slow because he had dementia at the same time. So we had to show him pictures and then just showing him those pictures, like it opened up a window or a
Yeah,
door,
that's
and
right.
then we would get that information. But on a normal day, we would have never gotten that information
You
until
would have right,
yeah,
right.
we would have never have known. So luckily for us,
Yeah,
we
it's
ran.
just it's how it's stored, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So,
it is.
and
Yeah.
when you're a little kid, you don't store things in language. Think about
Nope.
that,
Yeah.
right? Infants don't have language.
Nope.
Preschoolers, the 1 to 2-year-old has very minimal
Right.
language. You store it visually, right? Or you store it auditorily, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
sound can
Interesting.
trigger memories for people.
Yeah. I think that's why so many people relate to music for so many different reasons. You
Hmm.
hear a
Yeah.
song or a little clip of a song, and it brings you
Right,
back to when you
right.
first
Put you
heard
right
it.
back in that place,
Yeah, yeah, for
right?
sure.
So, what would you tell a grown man who's now a father that has children of his own, or in this case, boys of his own, and maybe his life growing up, he was always told to be quiet and don't show emotion, and maybe he wants to change that, or maybe he doesn't know what to do or how to process this or where to go. What would you tell?
Well, this is where the book that you mentioned comes in. All right. It's a safe place to start
Okay.
because it's a series of essays or little stories,
Hmm.
and the facing page is blank. It has a couple of stimulating questions on it, but it's blank so that you don't have to use words to react to the story. You can use drawing to react, you can use kind of intensity to
Okay.
react. Of course, you can use words and write things on the page, but you get to tap into earlier memories when you can draw or scribble in response, right? Because we hold memories in our bodies. And so if I read a little story and somehow it triggers something very intense in me, I might take that pen and just start
Hmm.
Yeah.
all over the facing page. Well, that is like, oh, wow, where did that come from? Right. And now I'm really curious about why is this story about being in grandma's kitchen, for example,
Hmm.
triggering all of this intense irritation and anger. Now I'm going to go fishing, all right? I'm going to go looking in my memory, and I'm going to go talking to other people in the extended family because now I'm really curious. So it's a trailhead, and I'm going to follow that trailhead down a path until I get some sense of satisfaction about why did that particular story trigger this intensity in me. And so that's really the therapeutic process for healing
Okay.
is to be able to follow a path and discover what's the root of this? Where did this start? What was the interaction
Mhm.
that got me to this particular emotional solution at that time that I have held onto and I still continue to use, even though it doesn't make sense in the present that I'm going to use that solution.
Wow. So back to you were talking about like having the children color to express. Is that why when a psychologist is dealing with a child that maybe has had some sort of trauma and they've shut down, but the police are involved, they'll have the child colored to try to get them to open up or whatever they're looking for? Is that
Right.
usually what they're doing?
Yeah,
Okay.
they'll use coloring, they'll use different characters,
Okay.
Mhm.
right, for the child, and you could put those any place in the room that you
Okay.
wanted, right? And
Okay.
so, yes, that's the reason that
Oh,
you're using body memory,
okay.
uh, when you use these things, all right? When you ask a kid to do a sand tray or to draw or color or to take characters and place them at different places in the room, you're really using body memory. And we hold a lot of things in our bodies.
Yeah, of
That
course.
that is interesting because I remember the reason why I also brought it up is because my niece, her boys they had a situation where the police were involved and they were went through a year of this and she kept saying like the kids would come home, she wasn't allowed to ask questions about how they colored and they did this and then the lady they like, but mommy, the lady kept my picture and she's like, oh, that's okay, honey. They probably want to put it on the refrigerator, even though she knew that's not the case. But
Right.
they're little. Oh, they just want to put it on the fridge. And like, okay, you know. But yeah, I remember her saying they would come home and just say they colored.
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, I never asked, don't want to know. But
Yeah,
yeah,
because it's
Yeah.
not only the shapes that you put on the page, it's also the
yeah.
intensity, all
Yep.
right? It's also kind
Oh,
of the location. Where do you locate things on the page?
I'm like, how hard
And
maybe they
how
want to.
intense are you with
Interesting,
using
interesting.
that crayon?
Okay, so like maybe like one part they're really like light and pretty, and then the next one like that, and then that's
Yeah,
the one
right,
area we want to focus on. Oh, that's
right,
interesting to know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I'm
Or
gonna
you
right?
might draw something and then cover it up,
yeah, yeah.
right?
I'm gonna
Yeah,
start watching little kids now.
just like covering up the family in the sand.
Right. That's right.
In your book, you talked about the emotional desert. What does that mean?
Yes. The emotional desert. Yeah, I think that is actually what we do to most of the males in
Mhm,
our population is that we deny them access to certain feeling states. We start that very young when we tell little boys that they're not supposed to cry.
mhm,
All right. Then boys make fun of each other
mhm.
for having any vulnerable feeling
True.
states,
Yeah, they do.
right? You're labeled as a sissy,
Mhm.
all right, and all other kinds of negative words
Mhm,
that boys use with each other to develop a hierarchy and to pick on certain boys that size wise might be smaller or they might be heavier set. We have this desire to diminish the up in order to put ourselves up. And that's a symbol of the way in which we have treated our boys
mhm.
because we do deny them access to the full range of feeling states. You know, they're not supposed to cry. They're not supposed to be needy. They're supposed to be brave and competent and successful and take risks. You know, all of that made sense during the caveman days. All right. I do want my caveman to be brave and not be a sissy and
Right.
pick up his spear and go out and kill
Mhm.
something
Right.
and bring it back for all of us to eat, but we don't live in caves
No.
anymore, right? But we treat our male population in exactly the same way. They're supposed to be brave, they're supposed
Yeah.
to be courageous, they're supposed to have strength, they
Mhm.
can't be needy, they can't be tender, they can't be sensitive, and then, you know, they grow up and we expect them to develop reciprocal relationships with women or men,
Huh.
right? To
Mhm.
develop loving relationships, but we've given them no tools for really
Right.
doing that. All
Yeah.
right. And so they turn it into responsibility. All right. I will be a
Yeah.
very responsible spouse. All right. Which might mean that, you know, I do heavy work around the house, or maybe I bring in a certain amount of money,
Mhm.
but I don't get into dynamics with my spouse about feelings or emotional needs.
Mhm.
I don't know how to have those conversations. And so when I come up against that requirement that, well, I'm supposed to, my wife or my spouse wants me to go into this emotional territory, I'm very uncomfortable. All right. And so rather than connecting, and that's why our jails are full of men, right?
Makes
Ah,
sense.
okay.
Because they don't problem solve by using their emotions. They problem solve by using their bodies,
Right.
Mm,
right? And once you use your body, then the society is going to say, I don't like that. Not comfortable for us. So, we're going to lock you away depending on how much of your body you
yeah.
used and how intense
Right.
it was. And so we have this huge problem of men in jails and also not capable of doing any kind of emotional problem solving. There is some movements to be able to educate guys in jail about their emotional states. And I think those are really laudable and they can be successful, but that's an uphill battle. It's
Yeah,
a
because they
real
got this
uphill
stigma
battle.
against them. Oh, you've been in prison, you'll go back type of thing. Like some
Yeah.
people can rehabilitate. Some people can come out and be successful. And I'm saying
Yes.
some because I know not all, unfortunately, can. But we can't point our fingers at every single one of them and say, "Oh, you've been there once, so go back." I mean, I knew a young man. I realized he had been missing. I'm like, "Where'd he go?" He got locked up for 7 years for drugs. He said he didn't need to be there for 7 years. It did nothing for him. He's out now. He's been out, I think, for almost 3 years. You would never know. You would never know. He is a completely changed person. His mama got on him and she's like, well, we gotta go. We gotta talk about this. This isn't happening. And he said to me, he's like, I should have never been in there for 7 years. He goes, yes, I made a mistake. He admits everything. He's like, I admit, he goes, I will take 100% blame for it. He
Yeah,
goes,
it takes responsibility, right?
it's responsibility. He goes, but 7 years in there, he goes, did nothing. He goes, it didn't help him.
Yeah, nothing productive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what he said. So you went you were talking about men and how they don't like to show their emotion or they don't know how. It brought up a story of my childhood friend. She's been married for 26 years and her husband's an EMT, volunteer firefighter in their small little town. And his mind, because it's a really small town in the South, he's always been men have to be the head of a household. They have to bring in the most money. Well, she started a business because, stay at home mom, two little girls, and that business took off. She now has like 7 or 8 employees. So obviously, she's making way more money than he is. And he got upset about it because he thought he had failed as a husband. He thought he failed as this. And she's like, you did not fail. She was like, you are an amazing person. You're an amazing husband. It's okay for you to feel this way. She goes, I didn't plan for my business to go poof. I didn't. And
Right.
she
Right.
did. She was just like, she's just doing this cute little thing. And next thing you know, she's like, wait, what the heck just happened? But, he at first she said he got really quiet and she sat him down. She's like, you have to talk to me. She says, something's wrong, but I don't know what is wrong. You're not helping me help you. And then once he was like, okay, and he told her, she looked at him, she's like, it's okay. She's like, it's
Yeah.
fine. She's like, it's fine. She's like, okay. He's like, okay. She's like, I love you for who you are. And she's like, you work very hard at what you do. She's like, I'm not ever going to take that away from you. So
That's right.
she always tells people he's a hard worker. He's this and that. She praises him as if he is like on the highest pedestal, you know?
And courageous. I
Yes.
admire anyone who does that type of work,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
I'm like,
It
it's a
is
small
it
town.
is
He even,
dangerous on a
yes,
daily basis.
it really is. So,
Takes a lot
yes.
of courage.
But
Isn't it funny how you use the word failure
yeah.
because of, compare and contrast what Gloria was talking about, how, back in the caveman
Yeah.
ages, they had to defend and protect
Yeah.
and do all the things. And that still to this day, how many years later, that word failure is still used.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah,
think for
because
him,
men think of success in the same way that this
yeah.
man thought of success, that I
Yeah,
have to
that's how
be
they
head
measure
of
it.
household, and
Yeah.
head of household means income.
Mhm.
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Regardless of the kind of work I do, head of household means I am responsible for taking care and providing the
Yep.
income
Yep.
for this family. But
Yeah.
congratulations to the 2 of them,
Yes. Yes.
right? That
Yes.
they could
Yep.
work through that
Yeah.
and see that it was a blessing for both of them
Yeah.
that she found a successful business.
Yes, it like I said though, it wasn't something that she never imagined where she would be today, honestly. She just wanted to, keep herself busy as you know what is when you have little toddlers and she just
Right.
wanted to keep herself busy and it just one night she woke
Took
up and
off.
yes, that's literally what happened.
Right.
He was like, you know, but he helps her out and he's an amazing husband. So, but like you said though,
Right.
I do think that men need to learn to express themselves more. I think with my dad, he did, but he didn't. Like
Mhm.
he was more of a people pleaser, wanted to make my mom always happy, and he didn't always tell her no when he should have said no. And that ended up in a lot of issues, especially right before he passed away, financial issues and other things, is that he just always wanted to make sure that they're
She was
taken care
happy.
of and happy. Yeah. Which is, I mean,
And
glad.
that's so common,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? That we do socialize our
Yeah.
boys with that expectation that
Yep.
you are to take care of your family,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? That you are the one who is responsible. You are the
Yeah.
one who is in charge.
Yeah. Yeah. My
So
husband was telling my boys that the other day. He's like, the world is changing. He said,
Mhm.
he goes, you just need to be prepared. It's not how it was when I was younger and your grandparents were younger and how it is now. He goes, when you get older and when and if you get married, he goes, things are not going to be what you thought. He goes, he just likes to prepare them and let them know, don't go in with this expectation because it may not happen.
that's right. Yeah, have more flexibility.
Yeah.
One of the other things that's happening with families today is that there are more fathers staying home to raise children.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what we were talking about last night. It's so funny that
Yep.
you said that. Exactly what we were talking about last night. Because I was watching, oh, what was it? I don't know if it was a YouTube video or whatever it was a couple of months ago where the dad decided to stay home because the mom was a doctor. And it
Mhm.
just made more sense for him to stay home with the babies because they had twin or triplet babies. I can't remember what it was, itty
Mhm.
bitties. And so when they looked at the cost of putting the children into
Children
daycare,
in daycare, right.
it was literally, well, he would have just been working to pay for their
Pay
childcare.
for daycare.
And he's
Might as
Yeah.
like,
well
Yeah.
stay home.
yeah, she's just like, then what would be the point? That's literally, and he says, if you're okay with that, he goes, I will quit and I will stay home and take care of the kids. And she was like, you would want to do that. And he said, it makes the most
Makes
logical
sense.
Yep,
financial
makes
sense.
sense.
And she's like, okay. And yeah, and he says it works great for them.
Yeah, it's happening
Yeah.
in frequently all over the United States
Yeah.
that dads are staying home and meeting together in groups like
Yeah.
moms used to do.
Yeah, down to
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
daddy groups, yeah. Which I think is good because I think a lot of children need their dads. I think a lot of times it's always mom's the comforter and the safe zone, and dad is but at the same time, dads can be mush if they, get it just right. So I think it's good, for the ones that want to stay home. And the ones that can't stay home, at least, if they come home and give their child that 10, 15 minute, whatever it is that they can give their child. It's better than nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I wow, oh my gosh, I could go on for days on this conversation because I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and so I see both sides of it. Donna just has boys, and so she
Mhm.
only got one side of it.
Yeah, right. Right. Exactly.
So,
It's complicated. Raising children is complicated.
It
oh gosh.
really is. No one gives you a book and tells you before, read this before.
Right.
No,
That's right.
it's true. I mean, my when I got married and I had my kids, I already had several nieces and nephews. So when my husband, when we had our daughter, he literally looked at her in the room and he's like, "What do I do?" Literally, he's
Uh-huh.
like, "What do I do?" And our friend was there and he's like, "Well, you gotta change your diaper." And he's like, "I'll show you what we do. Let's go." And it was so funny because I'm sitting in the hospital bed. My husband and his best friend are sitting there and they're changing my 3-hour-old daughter's diaper. And he's like, "This
That's
is what you
great.
do." And we were just cracking up over it, just watching them
That's
like, "Okay,
funny.
you do your thing over there. You guys bond with her. Good, good. I'm gonna go to sleep."
That's great.
Yes,
That's great.
I do. Wow. I don't know. Thank you so much. I mean, this is amazing.
You're
I could go
welcome.
on for so I guess one last thing is what would you tell anybody watching this podcast today that maybe they're a mom or they're a dad and they have boys? What would you tell them to
I would
prepare?
tell them to educate yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? Be much more curious
Mm-hmm.
about the history
Yep.
of boys and the
Mm-hmm.
needs of boys. And I would tell them to, on my website, there's a list of feeling words. And I would tell them, download that list of feeling words,
Okay.
laminate it if you need to, put one in the kitchen, one where you're playing and watching television, and one in the bedroom so that you educate your children and yourself
Okay.
Right.
and expand your feeling vocabulary. Because the
Oh,
brilliant thing about a human being is if you scan through this list of feeling words, the feeling that you are experiencing will pop off the page,
Wow.
right? Your brain knows what you're feeling, but you cannot find it because you don't have that word in your vocabulary.
That makes
yeah.
sense.
But
Yeah.
That makes
your
sense.
brain can recognize it. It's fascinating, right? And you can expand your feeling vocabulary and your children's feeling vocabulary, particularly your boys.
Mhm.
Right.
And it's incredibly valuable to expand your feeling vocabulary.
Gloria, tell us your website so that when people listen, we'll also have it in the
In the show notes,
description.
it's www.drvanderhorst.com. So it's www.drvanderhorst.com. And the feeling sheet is in one of the categories across the top of the website.
I will
Wonderful.
make sure that gets linked below and
Yeah.
we'll post us across of all of our social media. Thank you so, so
You're
much.
welcome.
I
I enjoyed.
yeah, I have lots of notes that I'm definitely going to be checking out because my boys are, how old are they? 14 and almost 16. So I'm definitely going to be looking at that because they're at that stage where they're teenagers and so they are
Yeah, they're
expressing
teenagers,
they
right?
are
They're
they are
building relationships of all
Yeah.
different
they're
kinds.
they're different from girls. People always tell me that it
They
was
are.
easier to raise the boys when they're younger and harder to raise the boys or girls when they're older. And I said, "Oh no, my girls were easier when girls were easier when they were teenagers as the boys now." And I'm like, it was really opposite. So,
Right.
but I just was like, I had older brothers, and I've always been the one to very just I'm like, all right, let's talk it up. When my kids come home, even my boys, I will know what their day is like coming home from
Yeah,
school
that's
by
good.
just looking at them. And I'll be like, no, they're my no, 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 no. What happened? Let's talk it through. And it might take me 5 or 10 minutes, even with my daughter. It was the same. I'm just gonna say, even with them, I'd be like, no, talk to me. What is going on? And they'd be like, nothing. I'm like, no. And so so I would walk away. I would let them calm down. And then I would come back maybe 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later. I'm like, okay, I'm like, I know you. I'm your mom. I know something happened. You're not going to be in trouble, but I need to know I can't fix it and help you if you don't help me. And they'd be
Yeah,
like,
that
okay.
processing is very important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they would come and they would tell me, and I did like I said, I did it with my girls and I did it with my boys. So I always tell people that my kids will tell me anything because I have that relationship with them to tell me, and it's okay. I'm like, I always tell them, so I'm like, tell me now so that I can deal with it now. I'm like, will you get in trouble? Depending on the situation, but it's better to tell me than let me find out about it.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
True.
yeah.
Good process. Keep it
Yes,
going.
yes. I just I'm like, just I always tell people, I'm like, even I have friends who have little kids, the same thing. I'm like, just let them calm down, then go back and talk it over with them. And I go, you probably will get more information that you didn't know you were going to get. So
True.
that's how I do with my kids. So but thank you so,
Thank
so
You're
you again,
welcome.
Gloria.
this
This was
was
wonderful.
It really
Thank
was.
you both. Thank you both. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yes, very nice to meet you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.